Hello, Nikki. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Artem. It's nice to be with you.
To do. I appreciate that you want to spend your time today with me doing this interview, having fun. I appreciate it. Thanks again. And can you tell me, please, and to our subscribers and to our audience, can you tell some words about yourself, introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Nikki Hill. I'm from the United States. I have spent a lot of my time with plants and gardens, and I came to Koh Phanong, to Thailand, 4 months ago. Got stranded here for the pandemic, longer than anticipated, because I felt like I wanted to learn Thai massage, a different way of interacting with people other than just conversations, because I felt like there's just some things missing in just having conversations about ideas. So, especially in the United States, I felt like people are really missing touch.
How many years did you live in the United States?
Before traveling?
Yes, in general.
I've spent most of my time there. I was born there. I did some international traveling when I was 15, which was a long time ago now, almost 20 years. I went to Europe, Switzerland, London, Paris.
When you was 15?
Yeah, and I went to New Zealand in 2007. So I've spent quite a bit of time in the United States between travel. I haven't left the United States except to Mexico for just a few days in 13 years before coming here to Thailand. So yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time there. I've done a lot of travel within the States, mostly camping out of my truck in the western United States.
You have a truck?
Yes.
A camper?
I've been a little bit of a nomad in the United States.
But when did you start to be a nomad in the United States?
About 7 years ago. Well, it was before that because I was a farmer for 6 years before that, starting in 2009. And I started farming in the city, doing urban farming, in part because I didn't know what else to do. I had gotten out of school for environmental science and gone into the field of restoration, and it all felt like a sham to me. I couldn't, something in me really couldn't handle the way in which we approached restoration, which was to use a lot of herbicides to fix things, and to be coming at it with this idea that we know what's best, that should be there. I saw it as kind of like using the same hammer that broke something to fix it. And I realized that that was the only jobs available in that field, that it was pretty standard practice to be like, you would only get grant money if you started your project with eradication, which is using chemicals to eradicate certain plants or animal species. Not always chemicals, but often there's a lot of allowance that lots of people would not be for using chemicals, other than in this situation. They would be like, oh, well, in this situation, we could see using it. And I couldn't handle it. So I had a bit of a midlife crisis at 27.
27, midlife crisis. Midlife crisis at 27.
That's also Saturn returns. Some people maybe heard of that. It was intense. So I didn't know what else to do, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just grow food for my neighbors. Because I didn't know where to put my energy. I really wanted to put it somewhere. So that's how I started farming. So I was an urban farmer for a couple years in Portland, Oregon, and met some other people who were doing that kind of thing there before it was really popular. And then we decided we wanted to leave the city. So my friend and I left the city and started leasing land from different landowners, and bringing the whole farm basically, but never owning the land. So we would bring the tractors, we'd bring the hoop houses, we'd bring all the seeds, all of the amendments, like everything.
How did you finance all this equipment?
We had an angel investor.
Angel investor.
Yeah, we had a good friend who wanted to support the project to see what could happen, because the idea the whole time was never for a business, really. It was mostly a response to being like, wow, you know, like, we don't know how to do a lot of things anymore in this culture, and
Yes.
At some point in time we're going to need to, because I don't think that this kind of empire can last. I mean, they all fall apart. Part of how it seems to me is that it gets too far stretched out from its real base. I don't know how to describe it other than that. So we were like, well, we'll work on food. So we were experimenting with what grows, like relearning. How do you do this at a small scale? How do you grow your beans and your grains, not just your vegetables? How do you grow your medicines?
And you didn't have any experience before you started from scratch? Or no, I mean, you did some studies in this area, so you had already some theoretical knowledge. But I mean, from when you start your first farming, so you just did from scratch all alone, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'd spent some time around plants, but I hadn't been like a very avid gardener or anything before that. And I studied ecology and botany in school, so was coming at it with, you know, some understanding of looking at things as a whole, and so not just wanting to like tear out everything and put in new stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I started from, but no previous gardening experience.
And what was your next step? So you leased the land and took all your equipment, took all the seeds, and used this land to grow vegetables. And what was the next step? What were these vegetables grown for? For whom, and what did you do with them?
We had kind of it started, we were doing community supported agriculture, so it's known as CSA. So that's where at the beginning of the season you like solicit people who want to invest. They give you like, you know, some of it was trade based, some of it was cash based. People would give you like $500, $600 for the season, and you would give them food every week, a bag of food. So that's how I started. So that money that they gave you at the beginning of the season helps the farmer that's when all of the money needs to go in to grow things, is at the beginning, before there's anything to sell, is the idea. So all of that money went back into the farm. There was never, ever a profit, which is fine. But it started that way, and then when we moved to the country, we had made some very good connections with different people who really wanted to support this project and this idea. So it was a little smaller, the amount of people who were putting in money, and we were just giving them more staple foods like winter squash that would store or cabbage that would store. We weren't trying to do it every week because most of those people were still in the city, which was a couple hours away from where we were. So we did it more that way. Yeah, we bought an old school bus to live in because we needed to bring us a place to live too. So we bought an old school bus, and that's how we hauled the farm down there too. It all in there.
And did you do YouTube channel where you showed it? No, you just
No,
no.
I wasn't really thinking of it, and was a little too busy for it.
Yeah,
And
yes.
a part of it too, we were just trying to see what would work and if it worked or not. You know, like we learned so much from just trying. Like the first property we went to, the first piece of land out of the city, had been a grass seed farm for like 50 years. The area we were in is grass seed capital of the world. That's where they grow all the grass seed for the lawns and the golf courses and stuff. So like pretty like commercial, chemical focused agriculture. So we leased 20 acres and ended up growing on 8 of them. We kept really big buffers because there's still massive agriculture going on all around us. And, you know, a lot of what we learned from that season, I mean, we had, I don't know, a very high failure rate, like 70-80% of crops failed.
Rate.
And part of that was realizing how damaged the soil had become, this ecosystem had become from 50 years of that treatment. and we ended up dumping something like 30 grand into that property. We've also bought a tractor that year, but and quickly realized that it just needed a rest. So, especially this particular property was like, it's a temperate rainforest area, so there's lots of rain in the winter. And this was a wetland area. The whole valley used to be a very big wetland. So that's where like everything would drain to these areas too, from all the land around you. So it didn't matter how big of a buffer you had, everything's connected. Like the square lines of the property is not, I mean, it's kind of arbitrary lines. Property lines are arbitrary. Everything's flowing throughout the landscape. You know, beyond, it doesn't matter about your borders.
Yes.
So we had a flood event there, massive flood event, and I had heard that you can't sell vegetables after a flood. I didn't know why. And I was like, okay, it was 2 weeks after the flood event, and I went and picked beets for myself, and I was chopping them up, making kraut, and then I was like, oh, I could take the beet tops and replant them for seed. So I went and looked at them, and you know, you cut a vegetable, and the water will come out, little droplets of water from where it has water in the body. It was metallic black liquid that was coming out. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Metallic black liquid coming out after because of the flood, or?
Yeah, this is my assumption. It concentrated all of the chemicals and different things from all the land around it, you know.
And it comes, but what? Because it is in the water. All these chemicals, all this stuff.
Well, it's like in the soil and in
water,
everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
And we'd had a conversation with some people before because, well, it was after this actually, but I was remembering from my ecology studies, like, people will think like, oh, there's more water, that means it would dilute things. But it's actually opposite, because when there's flood events, there's like a lot more momentum happening. And so the water is starting to disturb places where different substances have just been sitting quietly in the soil, passively. And now it's like, you know, disrupted them and concentrates them in the flow. Now everything's flowing together. So this is the part about how everything that we dump into the soil, the concentrations and the behavior is very different in water. It's much more persistent. The water like keeps it moving in the landscape and depositing at other places and stuff like that.
So I think that it means that if there is a field, two fields, one near another, one we say organic and another is conventional, the water moves.
Yeah.
The water can bring everything from one part to another, so it means that both soils can be spoiled.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean what you grow. It doesn't mean where you grow and what water, how you feed, how is it feeded the soil. Yeah, that matters.
Yeah, I mean you'll have some, you know, relative difference in those things, right? You won't be ingesting directly as many concentrated toxins or chemicals if you weren't spraying them on the soil, but you can't get around the part where all of it's all flow and connected.
It's connected, yeah.
You know, everything is. It's like the fabric of our landscape all works together. It's all makes one organism. You know,
Yeah.
the same way it does in our bodies. It's an interesting side note. So we've all heard about glyphosate now and how it's like the most used chemical in the world, and it's used in really high amounts. And when it came out, Monsanto had said that it had done trials and it was safe for humans, because that's what we're usually concerned about. But it was kind of sneaky the way, well, very sneaky the way they did it, because how they were able to say that was that in their studies, they found that how glyphosate interacts in your body is that it affects all of the microorganisms in your gut, and they claimed that that's not you.
What is this? When it's not, but it's in.
It's the gut flora, it's not you.
But it's inside. Certainly, it's.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I think it's a really interesting point to bring up, because how could anybody accept that as valid? The only way we could do that is because we've gotten to this place where we're thinking about things as being boxed and separate, when it's like, well, if you pull back a minute, it's like, of course I wouldn't exist without the millions of organisms that are living in my body. They all work together to make this function every single moment. So does all of the landscape. It operates the same, you know, has its own body and connection. Like, I can't like cut off the toe over there and not feel it up here. It's the same over there, you know.
Sometimes you can even feel the pain of someone else.
Yeah.
Of me, or of animal, of
Yeah.
what it works the same.
Yeah. I think that I've been thinking about this one and I like it for a while now, but like we talk about, we have different conversations going on in our world about people being disconnected from nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see effects of that, right, in different ways. But I think that it's kind of funny because I don't think we can actually be disconnected. Like, it's a false idea that you could actually, for even a second, be disconnected. So what we're actually trying to work with is this mentality or this idea that we're separate, because we can't actually be. And that's probably, you know, could be I think it is a source of where a lot of the depression and stuff comes from, and we don't understand, we think there's something wrong with us, is that you're a sensual creature getting signals from everything else that's telling you something's wrong, something's sick, something's not right, you know. But then in our culture, you know, some of our cultures lead us to think that there's something wrong with us, instead of our senses are functioning properly, and it's a warning signal that something's not quite right.
So it means that something is wrong with the environment around?
Yeah, or with, you know, with the mentality and stuff around it too, you know, like apathy or,
yes.
you know, just something not nourishing. You know, you can feel that drain.
And Nikki, tell me, tell me something about your family, because what did your parents do?
Okay. Well, my dad is an engineer, so he used to build helicopters and airplanes, design them, make sure they function properly. For the past 25 years, he's been the engineer for fly rods for fishing, like really high-end ones. So that's what he does. So a working guy. And my mom, she's always been kind of a rebellious spirit. So
okay, we should start with this, with mother, with our mother.
So she had some jobs when I was growing up. It's kind of interesting. She was one of the first women to work for the telephone company, where you climb the telephone poles with the spikes and stuff like that.
Cool.
And you know, there'd be a time where there was sexual harassment, and she'd get mad and quit. You know, so this was kind of her thing. She didn't really like stick around very long if it sucked for some reason. So she was, you know, towards our teenage years and stuff, kind of a stay-at-home mom, still doing her own stuff. She was a tennis player, so she had like kids camps or, you know, play a lot of tennis and stuff. So that's kind of what she did. She did a lot of like grassroots organizing stuff for like, it used to be kind of like Green Party stuff, and then she got more into like, you know, 9/11 happened, and so getting into talking about, you know, a different perspective on that, a different story, like what might have actually happened, false flag kind of stuff. So that's kind of what she's done.
So, and it influenced you as a child?
Oh, I'm sure. We would spend hours in the parking lot with my mom, my brother and I. She'd be like, I'm going to the grocery store, and we would cringe sometimes because we knew it would be a 2-hour conversation with some stranger in the parking lot about everything in the world and what's really going on.
And you have a brother?
I have one brother.
Okay, what is he doing, or how his life is happening?
He's been a wildland firefighter for the past decade. Right now, I think he's working for a volunteer fire department and helping build a KOA. So he got married to this wonderful lady a couple of years ago. She's got some kids, and he has one kid. And they decided they're tired of paying rent, so they bought a trailer. And they've been living in the trailer, traveling around living in the trailer. So, yeah. He's like looking for a little more, or has been a little more like stability or, you know, wanting very much to have his career and stuff. Like, he's really good at it. He loves it. It makes him feel, you know, really alive and enlightened and has a purpose and stuff like that. So it's been fun for me to be like watching him in that transition, because like I haven't lived in a house in over 10 years. I haven't paid rent in over 10 years. Like, I live out of the truck during the summer camping, and then you know, meet wonderful people and have some wonderful friends in my life where I stay at their place for some part of the winter. My mom had a friend who had this beautiful cabin in Northern California, remote, that I spent a few winters in. And I have a friend in New Mexico who has a place. And so the first time in 10 years I have a room of my own in this place, which is fun. But there was a period of time of alienation from my family. Not so much my close family, but the broader family. They just wondered what the hell I was doing. Like, I spent my 20s going to college, and I was dating this man for that whole time, and we were engaged to be married, and, you know, decided I didn't want to do that, and decided that I couldn't work in my field, and, you know, I've been kind of like, you know, the family had thought that I was really going somewhere, and I was, you know, on the right path and all this stuff, and so it was like kind of a pedestal that I fell down from, and there's a lot of alienation in that, and people thinking that I was weird and dumb and stuff like that, you know. So, but it's been fun to like be seeing some other, you know, people in the family, like my brother or some other, you know, friends and stuff starting to take those steps, and it feels really uncomfortable because you're trying to like also have what you've been having by trying to do these things, like trying to have the house and the job and pay the bills and stuff like that, and it makes it a little harder because I just gave up on all of it from the beginning, and I've had 10 years of stretching it to be like, that's okay, you know, I've come to a greater sense of peace, like, I don't know, something will happen, I can't worry about it all, and I'd rather not, like, you don't have to pay those bills, you know, you don't have to do things that way, but if you haven't been trying it a little bit, it's like a muscle you haven't used, so there's a lot more unsureness, you know.
And you had a normal life like other people, but just different.
Yeah.
But sometimes you felt sad and angry. It was a normal life, yeah. It was the same up and downs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But you didn't have any boss.
No, I haven't really ever been very good at holding a job. Not because I don't like to do stuff.
Yeah.
I really enjoy doing things. I'll give all my energy to something I care about. All of it.
Yes.
It often doesn't pay. But it's been kind of fun, actually, because more recently I started to like offer some classes for some of the plant work I've been getting into, and there's been really positive response from it. Like, people really needed to hear some of a different perspective that I can bring to them. It's different than the mainstream perspective they get. And where was I with this?
About the boss?
Oh, yeah. So, I still forget where I was going completely.
No, don't worry. I asked you, did you have a boss? You told me no, you were not so happy with following someone. Or...
So some of it, like, I realized that a part of continuing to just do these things regardless of having a position for paying, just following something that I cared about, that I believed in, and being like, well, I can do something else on the side for money every once in a while, or I just won't worry about it, or, you know, we've been blessed to have people who, you know, would offer some support, that it allowed this space to, like, have some different perspective that's very valuable. And if we as a culture don't give that to some people, are supportive of some divergent ways of being, we won't have that newness of perspective coming in. And so, like, if I'm thinking about the field of restoration, like ecosystem restoration, I wouldn't be able to think and speak some of the things that I see about it if I was employed by someone.
Yes.
I would be fired. Like, I've retained some of my freedom by not doing it for money. And in that way, I can see and speak to some things more freely.
Yes.
Like, I stopped in and talked to Forest Service and BLM, or these government organizations in the United States that deal with land management. And I go in and meet them sometimes, and I had this couple-hour conversation with this botanist at this place, and it was really interesting to be like speaking freely with him and him agreeing that all the restoration is failing, that we keep doing it in the same way, but it's not working. Like the failure rate is huge, like really bad, like not worth continuing. But in those systems, you get caught in a rut of like you have to keep asking for funds to do it in a certain way, otherwise you won't get them. And it's set up so that you have to be asking for eradication funds, otherwise you don't get funds for the rest of your project, for planting. So it's a setup, and that's the part I saw at 27 that I couldn't stomach, was that there was no space allowed for anything to change when how you're doing it isn't working. It's not working. Oh, but we need to get the grant again, so we're going to actually say that it's working. Okay, so we're going to lie for money.
Lie for money.
We're going to fudge it for money so that we can keep our job. And so many people are worried about having their job.
Yes.
That so much shiftiness is allowed for that, you know, because people are afraid. They need that comfort.
And but in the same situation we have in many fields
Oh yeah.
of
Sure.
of people's of our life. Then it's that we have to lie for money,
Mm-hmm.
or they have to lie for money,
Yeah.
or make jokes for lie, or just
Or
don't
maybe-
tell the whole truth.
Yeah, maybe not lie, but accept some things,
Accept
and then
some
maybe
things.
start telling a different story,
Difference, yeah.
so that you could actually do it every day.
And do you? How is it for you? Do you? Can you say that the United States is a really independent and free country? Because in my perception, it was always the American dream and freedom and freedom of speech, freedom of
Mm-hmm.
show yourself and do this. Is it really like this that you can do anything you want, and you will not get anything for this?
I don't think so. No.
But if you want to plant, if you want to, I don't know, to grow organic and to go organic and to live independent in a track and be alien,
Yeah,
it
you can-
it works.
You can still do that.
No.
I mean, there's certain things tricks that you learn, right?
Mm.
So, like I realized more recently than not that I'm actually not allowed to have a bank account if I don't have a permanent physical address.
Permanent physical address. So you have
So
to
I
register.
need to have one with someone, with a friend or something.
Mm.
Otherwise, I would actually not be allowed to have a bank account. So,
But you can use the friend's address, yes?
yeah,
Any friend's address.
sure.
But do you have to register yourself officially in some authority or some department? For example, in Germany, I have to go to authorities
hmm
and register myself with them. So I have to show the contract for the flat or for the apartment.
Just because.